Welcome back. The real estate market on the Suncoast is booming, and with that, so are real estate scams. According to the IRS, real estate scams have doubled since the 2000s began, and one of the most popular, wire fraud. Imagine putting down a payment on a new home and your hard-earned cash winds up in somebody else's bank account. Joining us for more are Laura Bowers, who works in the title department at Michael Saunders and Company, Michael Bamig, a realtor at Michael Saunders, and Rebecca Guilfoyle, a realtor at Veterans Realty. Mark, I meant to say there. Laura, let me start with you because you work in the title department, so you see this a lot in terms of wire fraud. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking about, we have a lot of parties involved to the transaction that could possibly be infiltrated by scammers out there. What we most often see are buyers and sellers' emails being compromised. The scammers will watch to see what's going on, and then they will send an email out that looks like it's coming from the title company, instructing the buyer to wire funds to a specific account.
How are the emails compromised?
There are various ways that they compromise. There are phishing attacks. So someone clicks on a link, they spoof. What they do is they set up an email account that looks very similar to mine, but they might add an extra L to it.
So that's kind of like what happened in the Russia investigation with Podesta's emails, that he got an email that looked legit, pushed the wrong button, and there we go, Hillary Clinton's emails all over the place. Mark, how have you seen this play out?
Well, first of all, what we try and do is educate the consumer right off the bat. We now have a separate wire fraud form that we put into every transaction that we want the buyer and the seller to sign. But we've seen this happen when we get a call from someone that says, hey, I just got an email that says they're changing their wiring instructions, and we're saying, we haven't changed anything, don't do it. So like Laura said, they can put a dot somewhere in the email and it looks exactly like it came from somebody that's in the transaction, and it really hasn't. It's come from a third party trying to get the money, and once it's wired, it's very difficult to get it back.
And Rebecca, I can imagine this has devastating impacts on the victims and also maybe the sellers, because they thought they had the deal and they did not.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of times people will pack everything up. You have to have it completely vacant, ready to go, U-Hauls, boxes, everything done, cleaned and wiped out, and then there's no transaction. Buyers lost all of their money and there's really nothing to do about it. There's no money, there's no transaction. So
what's the recourse?
Well, I could tell you one tip is to, the recourse is to actually contact the bank immediately as soon as it's discovered, and then file a report with the local FBI office immediately.
That doesn't get your money back though immediately.
It can in some cases. If you report it within less than 24 hours, the chances are very good that you can recover the money.
Okay, we have to take a quick break. Our conversation on real estate scams continues. Welcome back. We are talking about real estate scams, and joining us for more are Laura Bowers, who works in the title department at Michael Saunders and Company, Mark Bomig, a realtor at Michael Saunders, and Rebecca Guilfoyle, a realtor at Veterans Realty. And so let's talk about issues that come up in terms of rentals. And this is something, Mark, that has been going on for years, and it's incredible that we have not yet gotten a handle on. Explain.
It's very difficult. I actually had a listing near our office off of Manatee Avenue, and I got calls from people wanting to know where to make the deposit for a rental, and I told them it wasn't for rent, and it was advertised on Craigslist with photos from the MLS posing as a rental. And what they do is they drop the price way below the market to get an interest, and if it's too good to be true, it usually is. So luckily they called the sign that was in the front yard, and I've even had them remove the sign in the front yard. So it's very difficult when they post something on Craigslist because you have no way to really track it, and then the client or the potential renter is wanting to make a deposit, and the scammer is wanting them to send them a deposit because it's a hot property and all these people are interested in it.
And Rebecca, you've said that you've seen this all the time, and sometimes you could tell by the pixels in the picture.
It'll usually be pixelated because when you take a photo that's a year or so old and you drag it to your computer and you upload it again, it'll lose a lot of the clarity. So the pictures will usually be a little hazy. The words that they'll use is, I'm sorry, I got a job promotion, I'm out of the area, you can look at the property, just send me a check. You know, it usually is way too good to be true, especially for renters who are, you know, small families looking for things, and it's usually the least expensive with the most bang for your buck. And you're going, how is this real? All of my buyers who are wanting to rent one more year just to save up a little bit more, I always go with them and look at these properties. And I've experienced where there will be a lockbox on the property belonging to another company actually renting the property. But a scammer will come and take a copy of the key, make a copy of the key, put their own lockbox on it, put their own sign in the yard, and create a fake account online.
And Laura, we only have a couple of seconds left here, but this is awful hard for law enforcement to investigate.
Absolutely. Very difficult.
And I would imagine that, I mean, there's so many cases like this, they get overwhelmed. I know I have a friend who's a detective, and that's in the situation he's confronted with very, very often. We have to take another quick break. We are just getting warmed up. Our conversation on real estate scams will continue right after this. Welcome back, everyone. We are talking about real estate scams, and joining us for more are Laura Bowers, who works in the title department at Michael Saunders and Company, Mark Bomig, a realtor at Michael Saunders, and Rebecca Guilfoyle, a realtor at Veterans Realty. And Mark, we were talking during the break about, especially now with a hurricane bearing down on Florida, situations like that cause a lot of opportunity for misdeeds itself. Explain in terms of homes being damaged, and we're going to need our roofs fixed. What can happen?
Well, typically what happens is when there's a large area of damage, such as a heavy storm like what's coming now towards the Destin area, roofs get torn up, trees fall on houses, and contractors are out doing their best to get the clients taken care of, but then you have the unscrupulous type that go in and pretend to be the contractors. They tell them that there's such a long wait. If they want to get in line to get their roofs repaired, get the trees removed, they need to issue a deposit, and then those people never show back up, and so now they've left and just collected a fee for not doing anything.
And I would imagine that a lot of, especially the elderly, are especially vulnerable to situations like that. Rebecca, another thing that is, I know this drives you crazy, but things can happen during open houses. And that's something that homeowners really have to be cautious about. Explain.
Well, there's safety concerns anytime you show a property, some of which would include theft of items. So we always go over a checklist for our sellers to put away and lock up specific items, your prescriptions, your valuables, things of that nature, especially if you are living in the property. So we want to make sure that those things are taken with you or locked up securely. People have a tendency to be very trusting and, okay, just go take a look and let me know how you think about the property, but that can open the door, unfortunately, for sticky fingers.
And I would imagine, again, law enforcement are probably deluged by situations like this. Often it's very hard to investigate these cases, Mark. Well,
the other thing is that you might not find out that something's missing for 2 or 3 weeks when you go to get whatever it is. I mean, it's not like when you've done having your house shown that you go back and inventory everything in your house. So sometimes it's a longer period of time before the occupants or the owners of the house know that something is actually gone, and then by that time you've probably had other people in your house, so it's very difficult to say where it actually disappeared from.
And Laura, we talked about the issues involving the wire transactions, but when you're talking about titles and so forth, what are the other big problems that you see?
In terms of fraud, you mean?
Yes.
Well, we actually had an incident back a couple years ago now. One of the primary targets for fraud in Florida is what I call it lot fraud. So the owners are absent, they live out of state, they live out of the country. Someone unscrupulous will go ahead and email Mark and say, Mark, I've got a lot that I want to sell over here on, ABC Avenue. Could you get that listed for me? All the communication is done via email, and the property is sold, and lo and behold, that wasn't the real owner of the property. And that is where title insurance is so important to have to protect the buyer from those types of fraudulent activities. A lot of people think when you do a title search you reveal everything, but fraud and forgery are one of the two major components that are covered by title insurance.
How often do people basically forego the title insurance and open themselves to this kind of fraud?
Not very often, because we again educate the customer as to how important it is and the types of things that it does protect them against, and it's a one-time premium that they pay that is going to protect their most valuable asset. More than likely.
I would imagine the industry and government have made some inroads in terms of certain types of fraud out there. There were situations that I used to investigate in terms of title fraud where people would forge documents and then pass them off. At the clerk's office. Mark, you see that less often now?
A lot less. Besides that, the mortgage fraud has really been decreased because of all the tight government restrictions that are now in place. It used to be a saying, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a mortgage, and that was pre-2006, and it's completely stopped now.
Right. The flip side of that, Rebecca, it has made it more difficult for all of us to get mortgages because of what you have to go through
Absolutely.
to get it done. What impact has that had in terms of home buyers and home sellers in terms of really getting through the process?
Well, I'll tell you, from my experience as a local in Bradenton, I've witnessed entrepreneurs have a very difficult time. Myself, as a realtor, it's actually very difficult because you balance the ebbs and flows of your business, and you deduct certain items, and getting a loan based on your business is actually very difficult. So you've got a lot of, you want to do small town, local entrepreneurship, and you want to support local and grow the community that way. But now the hoops that you have to jump through to get these loans are very, very tough. So I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, and I've noticed that new construction is a little bit easier for them. I'm not sure exactly why. I'm not sure, but.
Is it because that when you're dealing with new construction, the sellers are basically these large, are the builders, they're larger companies, and they have a reason to help even first-time home buyers get through the process?
I think that's correct. I would agree with that, yep.
One other area that we should talk about, and I've also seen this in terms of movers, when people are buying new homes and moving in, there are unscrupulous moving companies out there that basically will hold a family's belongings for hostage. Mark, how does this happen?
Well, it really is geared around them giving an estimate at first to the people who are doing the move, and then coming up with a discrepancy maybe in their original quote. Maybe they quoted them per pound rather than per room, and they say that they went over the scales and it was much higher. So in order for them to get their furniture, they're charging them an exorbitant fee over what they've quoted, maybe very well knowing that when they were loading the truck it was going to be more.
And I bring this back to the question I've been asking all along. When things like that happen, you want to call police and get immediate help, but what kind of position are police in when they respond to this?
It's very difficult for the police to get involved because depending on what the contract says from the moving company, the police would want you to file a report and then take it up with an attorney. So
that
while the
doesn't help you
people,
today.
that's exactly right, while their furniture is sitting in the back of the van, they don't have much choice but to pay the bill to get the furniture.
All right, time for final thoughts. And Laura, in terms of the wire transactions where we were talking about, what should people be aware of when they go through this process, and how could they avoid even the issue of the wire fraud we were talking about? How can we avoid that from happening in the first place? Very
simple. Get out from behind the computer and pick the telephone up, and always verbally confirm the wire instructions. That's the best practice that we've implemented now for quite some time now, to just verify everything verbally over the telephone. If you do receive an email, And there's any suspicion whatsoever, just call the telephone number, not in the email, but from the official website or from the number that your real estate agent has given you to confirm that information. Just make sure that you change your passwords. Never ever rely on an email for wire instructions.
The difficulty there is that when you're buying or selling a property like that, there are so many things that are spinning around that I would imagine it's difficult for people to do all that. Rebecca, what is the one thing you want folks to walk away from this conversation with?
I would definitely say, like you said also, to do your research, and that is to compare and contrast. You can go from Zillow to Craigslist to Facebook Marketplace. You can go a Google search and go, this just doesn't seem right, to trust your instincts and to ask a professional. And that's why we're here.
And Mark, what's the one thing you
My
want?
one thing takeaway is never ever trust a last-minute instructions to change wiring instructions, because they do not do that.
Slow it down.
Slow it down, take your time, call and verify like Laura said, but they don't send last-minute emails asking you to change where that money is directed.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of you had to say about last night's show on the future of education. Democrat Andrew Gillum wants to increase spending on public education $1 billion by raising taxes on corporations and raising teacher wages to at least $50,000 a year. Republican Ron DeSantis also wants to put more money into classrooms by looking for efficiencies while also expanding school vouchers, which would help lower income students attend private schools. We went to Facebook to hear what some of you have to say about that. And Pete says, I've always supported the idea of expanding school voucher programs, which would help lower income students attend private schools. And I don't like the idea of raising taxes on businesses, so I would prefer Ron DeSantis. And Aaron says, I am glad to see Ron DeSantis wants to put more money into schools. However, I fail to see how he wants to pay for it rather than cut efficiencies. No thanks. I've been there and I know what that really means. What is Ron DeSantis' position on paying teachers more? We are currently ranked 42nd in teacher pay. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/MySuncoast. We want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Laura Bowers, who works in the title department at Michael Saunders and Company, Mark Bowmick, a realtor at Michael Saunders, and Rebecca Guilfoyle, a realtor at Veterans Realty, Inc.